Clarity becomes a weapon the moment you realize how many people move through life without it. This audiobook gives you the mental edge to rise above confusion and navigate challenges with strategy instead of struggle. Chapter 1 defines true direction. Chapter 2 breaks down complex problems. Chapter 3 shifts focus to high-leverage choices. Chapter 4 prepares you for obstacles. Chapter 5 sharpens pattern recognition. Chapter 6 builds scenario mapping. Chapter 7 strengthens adaptability. Chapter 8 refines resource use. Chapter 9 enhances evaluation. And Chapter 10 develops enduring mental frameworks. Subscribe to Audiobook every day for daily strategic growth. Number 1. Define long-term direction with clarity. Clarity has a quiet power. It sharpens intention, steadies the mind, and pulls life into alignment. When long-term direction becomes clear, noise fades and priorities rise to the surface. Every choice gains a sense of purpose, and even the smallest action feels meaningful. Strategic thinking begins here, by deciding where life is truly meant to go. Without clarity, energy scatters. With clarity, the path gathers itself beneath each step. Defining long-term direction is not about predicting the future. It is about choosing what deserves devotion and what no longer deserves space. It is the foundation of every advantage you will build. Many people drift not because they lack talent, but because they lack focus. They move from task to task, crisis to crisis, relying on short bursts of motivation that disappear as quickly as they appear. A clear long-term direction changes everything. It becomes the anchor that steadies emotion, the compass that guides decision, and the filter that protects attention. When a person knows their direction, they stop negotiating with excuses. They stop chasing random goals. They stop saying yes to every demand. They begin living with intention instead of reaction. Clarity does not arrive by accident. It forms through honest examination, one that requires courage and calmness. The mind must face what it truly desires, rather than what the world expects. Long-term direction becomes powerful only when it reflects the deepest values, not temporary impulses. It begins with a simple but transformative question: what kind of life deserves your discipline? The answer does not need to be perfect, but it must be sincere. Even a slightly defined horizon is better than wandering in circles. The first movement toward clarity is to separate wants from intentions. Wants change quickly, intentions stay rooted. A want may spark excitement, but an intention shapes character. For example, wanting wealth is a common desire, but the intention behind it might be stability, freedom, or the ability to help others. Wanting success is natural, but the intention might be mastery, contribution, or self-respect. Identifying intention creates a deeper form of clarity, one that does not crumble when circumstances shift. When intention aligns with direction, the mind can withstand pressure without losing focus. Once intention becomes clear, the next step is to articulate the long-term direction in simple, concrete language. Many people use vague phrases such as "I want a better life" or "I want to be successful." Those statements create no movement because they provide no destination. Clarity demands precision. A direction like build a calm, disciplined, financially stable life within the next 10 years generates momentum because it points toward a specific quality of existence. A direction like become a leader who solves complex problems with composure and intelligence offers something the mind can steadily pursue. The clearer the description, the stronger the pull. Clarity also requires honesty about the gap between where life is and where life must go. This gap is not discouraging, it is empowering. It shows the territory that must be crossed. Without acknowledging the gap, strategies become unrealistic. Long-term direction demands awareness of strengths, weaknesses, habits, and patterns. The Stoic approach sees this not as judgment, but as observation. The mind looks at its current state, the way a strategist studies a battlefield, not with fear but with alertness. Only by seeing the truth can it choose the sharpest path forward. With a clear direction articulated and the current reality understood, strategic thinking comes alive. Every decision gains context. A person who knows their direction can evaluate choices by a simple measure. Does this move me closer to the life I intend to build or push me further away? This question protects focus better than discipline alone. It turns daily actions into strategic steps instead of random motions. Clarity transforms life into a deliberate mission rather than a chaotic experience. Clarity also influences emotional resilience. When a long-term direction exists, setbacks become smaller. They lose their power to define identity. A temporary failure does not destroy someone who knows where they are going. It simply becomes another step in the process. Challenges feel less personal because the mind understands that obstacles are part of the path, not proof of inadequacy. Clear direction generates persistence because the destination matters more than the discomfort. Without direction, every setback feels like the end of the journey. With direction, setbacks become only detours. Strategic clarity also helps control reactivity. Many people waste energy reacting to every distraction, every criticism, and every urgency around them. When direction becomes clear, the mind becomes selective. It stops giving attention to things that hold no long-term significance. A clear horizon trains the mind to differentiate what deserves emotional investment and what must be ignored. Distractions lose their allure. Negative opinions lose their weight. Impulses lose their control. Clarity becomes a shield that protects the mind from unnecessary mental battles. Real clarity is not only mental, it must express itself through action. A direction that remains in the mind alone becomes wishful thinking. To activate clarity, the long-term vision must be translated into daily commitments. This translation is where many people fail, not because the direction is wrong, but because the execution is vague. Strategic clarity means connecting the distant future to the immediate present. A person might have a 10-year direction, but they must also design a 1-month focus and a 1-day action. This creates a bridge between vision and practice. Daily habits shape long-term results more than dramatic moments. A clear direction becomes powerful when paired with simple, repeatable actions. If the direction involves building a calm mind, daily reflection becomes essential. If the direction involves financial stability, daily budgeting and learning become non-negotiable. If the direction involves leadership, daily discipline, reading and communication practice become part of the routine. Clarity becomes meaningful when it guides action consistently, rather than occasionally. The key is not intensity but continuity. Clarity also sharpens boundaries. Long-term direction forces the mind to choose what to eliminate. Many people fail not because they are doing too little, but because they are doing too much. A clear direction empowers the mind to say no without guilt. It treats attention as a resource, not a habit. It understands that every unnecessary commitment subtracts from future success. Clarity cuts away the non-essential, leaving behind only what contributes to the mission. This creates space for more meaningful progress. Another important element of long-term direction is the willingness to adjust without abandoning the path. Clarity does not mean rigidity. Life shifts, environments change, and new opportunities arise. A strategic mind reviews its direction periodically, not to replace it impulsively, but to refine it with wisdom gained through experience. Adjustment is a sign of growth, not confusion. A clear direction welcomes improvement. The key is staying committed to the underlying intention while adapting the route. Defining long-term direction also strengthens identity. Over time, the mind begins to align behavior with the chosen direction. Identity shapes action, but action also shapes identity. When a person consistently commits to a meaningful direction, they begin to see themselves as someone worthy of that future. Confidence grows naturally. Discipline becomes less of a battle. Self-doubt weakens. The long-term direction becomes not only a goal but a reflection of who they are becoming. Strategic clarity gives life a sense of purpose that cannot be easily shaken. It offers calm during uncertainty and structure during chaos. It guides effort, protects time, and strengthens resilience. It illuminates what matters and dissolves what does not. This clarity becomes a source of self-respect because it proves that life is being lived with intention rather than instinct. Long-term direction, once defined, becomes a lifelong companion. It supports every chapter of growth and every moment of pressure. It reminds the mind why the struggle is worthwhile. It encourages discipline when excuses appear. It transforms daily routines into meaningful steps toward a future crafted with intention. Strategic thinking begins here, by knowing where you want to go and committing to the path with clarity, courage, and unwavering purpose. This is the foundation of outsmarting any challenge, a mind guided by direction, not distraction. Number 2. Break problems into manageable strategic parts. A challenge feels overwhelming only when it is seen as one giant tangled mass. The mind freezes, not because the problem is impossible, but because it has not yet been broken apart into something the hands and the mind can actually hold. Strategic thinking starts by reducing complexity into smaller elements that can be studied, understood, and acted upon. The moment a problem is divided into pieces, clarity returns, the fear dissolves, the path forward reveals itself in steps rather than storms. What once felt heavy becomes something practical, something navigable, something that can be moved with steady effort instead of frantic force. Many people crumble under pressure not because they lack intelligence, but because they treat every challenge as a single, immovable obstacle. They attempt to solve everything at once. They want immediate resolution. They want the entire answer to appear in one flash. Life rarely works that way. Progress comes through patient disassembling, through seeing the layers hidden beneath the surface. Breaking a problem into parts is an act of discipline and calmness. It tells the mind to slow down, to examine the structure, to pull apart the threads until the difficulty becomes a series of smaller solvable tasks. The mind, when stressed, jumps into emotional reaction. It focuses on the worst-case scenario, or the entire weight of the situation. Breaking the problem down disrupts this reaction. It brings the mind back to reason. It turns abstract fear into concrete steps. A problem may look like a mountain, but every mountain is climbed one foothold at a time. The path becomes visible only when the climber stops staring at the summit and starts looking at the next step. Every complex challenge contains patterns. Strategic thinkers search for these patterns because they make problems predictable. Instead of fighting the entire situation, they isolate components that repeat or create friction. For example, a financial issue may include overspending, lack of planning, and emotional decision-making. These are separate problems, even if they feel like one burden. Once separated, each one can be addressed individually. Overspending can be controlled with structure. Planning can be built through habit. Emotional spending can be reduced through awareness. The solution becomes a series of manageable actions, rather than a chaotic cloud of frustration. Dividing a problem also exposes what truly matters. Often half the stress comes from issues that are not even central to the challenge. Some parts of the problem hold the real weight, others are distractions attached to it. When a problem is broken apart, it becomes easier to see which elements deserve immediate attention and which can be delayed, delegated, or ignored. This prevents wasted energy and sharpens focus. It protects the mind from drowning in unnecessary complexity. Strategic thinking requires the ability to step back and observe rather than react. To break a problem into manageable parts, begin by examining it as though it belongs to someone else. Detaching emotionally allows the mind to see structure. Once distance is gained, the next step is to list the components. A problem usually contains steps, triggers, obstacles, unknowns, and desired outcomes. Each piece becomes a separate target. Each target requires a specific action. Instead of confronting a single intimidating task, the mind confronts several small, achievable missions. This transforms fear into movement. Breaking problems apart also reveals timelines. Some parts of the problem require immediate action, while others can wait until clarity increases. This prevents overwhelm. Not every piece needs to be solved today. Some only need acknowledgement. Others need planning. Others need patience. A massive problem becomes less frightening when the mind realizes that only one small portion must be handled right now. This keeps stress from spiraling into paralysis. Another advantage of breaking problems down is the ability to identify what is within control and what is not. People often waste emotional energy fighting elements of a situation that no amount of effort can influence. When the problem is divided, it becomes easier to isolate the uncontrollable pieces. Those pieces are set aside, observed with calm acceptance, and allowed to exist without draining strength. Control is then applied to the pieces that respond to action. This creates progress without unnecessary suffering. Every smaller part of a problem carries its own solution, but the solution becomes visible only when the problem is small enough to approach rationally. Attempting to tackle everything in one stroke leads to confusion, frustration, and emotional exhaustion. Breaking problems apart does not eliminate difficulty, but it transforms the difficulty into something the mind can handle. A person gains power not by being fearless but by being strategic. Fear may remain, but strategy keeps it from taking the lead. Once a problem is divided, the next step is prioritization. Not all parts need equal attention. Some create the foundation for solving the rest. Others have minimal impact. Strategic thinkers locate the part that, once addressed, removes the most pressure. This is known as a leverage point. Addressing this first creates momentum. Momentum then makes the remaining steps easier. Progress becomes a chain reaction. The mind begins to believe in its ability to solve the problem, which increases stability and confidence. Practical application requires consistency. A problem that is divided into parts becomes solvable only when each part receives deliberate action. It may be uncomfortable, but the discomfort is contained. It does not become overwhelming because the task is clearly defined. Challenge becomes measurable. Progress becomes trackable. The mind stays engaged rather than scattered. A person who solves one small part each day ends the week with 7 victories rather than 7 days of stress. Breaking problems apart also builds resilience. It teaches the mind that solutions often come through patience rather than dramatic breakthroughs. It trains discipline by reminding the thinker that small steps carried out consistently produce long-term results. This habit strengthens identity. Over time, the mind begins to approach every challenge with a calm, analytical attitude rather than panic or avoidance. This shift in perspective becomes a source of stability that extends into all areas of life. Large problems often push people toward avoidance. They wait, hoping the situation will resolve itself. Avoidance increases pressure. The problem grows. Breaking the problem into parts disrupts avoidance because smaller tasks feel less intimidating. The first action becomes small enough to begin. Once momentum starts, avoidance loses its grip. Movement replaces hesitation. This approach also creates clarity in communication. When a problem is broken into components, it becomes easier to explain, ask for support, or collaborate with others. People respond more effectively to specific tasks than to vague distress. Clear structure invites cooperation. It prevents misunderstandings and accelerates progress. The act of breaking problems into parts is not only a method, it is a mindset. It encourages the thinker to seek structure within chaos, possibilities within pressure, and solutions within uncertainty. It cultivates a sense of inner steadiness, a reminder that no challenge is too large when approached with strategy rather than emotion. Every strong decision-maker, leader, or strategist relies on this principle. What appears complicated becomes simple. What appears impossible becomes possible in stages. As progress continues, confidence grows. The mind realizes it can dismantle challenges regardless of size. Each solved piece becomes a source of internal strength. Resilience develops from knowing that difficulty can always be transformed into steps. This is not optimism, it is discipline. It is the understanding that mastery is not granted to those who avoid difficulty, but to those who organize it into manageable, actionable parts. No challenge remains overwhelming when the mind chooses to dissect it. Breaking a problem apart is the act of reclaiming power. It is the reminder that solutions appear when the thinker stops staring at the whole storm and starts examining the individual drops. The problem shrinks. The path opens. The mind advances with steadiness, precision, and courage. Number 3. Redirect focus toward high-leverage choices. Life expands or contracts based on where attention is placed. The mind has a limited amount of energy each day, and the direction of that energy determines the quality of progress. Some actions move life forward with remarkable force, while others drain time without offering meaningful results. High-leverage choices are the decisions that create disproportionate impact, actions that push many areas forward at once, actions that reduce chaos, strengthen stability, and accelerate growth. Redirecting focus toward these choices requires discipline, awareness, and the willingness to step away from habits that feel comfortable but contribute little. Many people struggle not because they lack effort, but because their energy is scattered across activities that do not matter. They become busy instead of effective. They chase small wins that offer temporary satisfaction, but no long-term advantage. The mind becomes cluttered with low-value tasks that create the illusion of productivity. Strategic thinking cuts through this illusion. by shifting attention to choices that influence the future far more than they cost in effort. This shift is subtle at first, but once mastered, it transforms the way life unfolds. Impactful choices are often quieter, slower, and less dramatic than the distractions that pull the mind in every direction. They require patience, clarity, and the ability to resist instant gratification. High-leverage choices include actions like learning a skill that multiplies opportunities, building relationships that expand possibilities, organizing systems that reduce future stress, and developing habits that compound over time. These decisions rarely offer quick rewards, but they create strong foundations that support everything else. Redirecting focus begins with identifying where attention currently goes. Many people do not realize how much time is consumed by impulses, trivial decisions, and emotional reactions. The mind must pause and observe the flow of the day. It must detect the tasks that drain energy without contributing to long-term direction. Once these patterns are seen, they lose their power. Awareness becomes the first form of leverage, because it prevents the mind from acting blindly. After recognizing where energy is being lost, the next step is to uncover the decisions that hold the greatest influence. These decisions are usually connected to long-term stability, growth, or wisdom. They improve multiple areas at once. For example, choosing to maintain physical health enhances energy, mood, and productivity simultaneously. Choosing to manage finances wisely reduces stress, supports freedom, and increases opportunity. Choosing to strengthen self-discipline improves consistency, resilience, and decision-making across the entire life structure. Each of these actions affects far more than one isolated area. High-leverage choices often require courage. They demand stepping into unfamiliar territory, confronting discomfort, or abandoning habits that offer short-term relief. The mind may resist at first because low-effort actions feel easier, but easy choices rarely create meaningful progress. The strategic mind understands that meaningful change comes through decisions that stretch ability, challenge weakness, and build strength. Each high-leverage choice becomes a vote for the future rather than a reaction to the moment. To redirect focus effectively, the thinker must simplify. An overloaded mind cannot identify high-impact opportunities. Removing unnecessary commitments creates space for more deliberate actions. Simplifying life does not mean doing less. It means doing what matters most. It means protecting time with boundaries, preserving mental energy for strategic decisions, and refusing to be pulled into trivial demands. A simplified life amplifies clarity, and clarity amplifies leverage. High-leverage choices also come from understanding which actions produce compounding returns. Compounding is not limited to finance. It applies every area of life. Skills compound. Knowledge compounds. Habits compound. Discipline compounds. Every small investment grows over time, creating results that far exceed the original effort. When the mind consistently chooses high-leverage actions, life begins to shift in ways that appear almost disproportionate to the energy invested. Redirecting focus also requires learning to pause before acting. Most mistakes happen because the mind reacts quickly, without examining the long-term consequences. A moment of stillness creates space for evaluation. In that pause, the question becomes clear: will this choice create lasting advantage, or will it simply relieve pressure temporarily? That small moment can redirect the entire path. High-leverage decisions are usually found in the quiet space between impulse and action. Another element of high-leverage focus is understanding the law of trade-offs. Choosing what matters means releasing what does not. Every decision has a cost. Time spent on low-value tasks cannot be recovered. Attention given to distractions reduces attention available for strategic growth. The disciplined mind accepts that trade-offs are inevitable and chooses the ones that strengthen the future instead of weakening it. This approach removes guilt and replaces it with clarity. A powerful advantage of focusing on high-leverage choices is that momentum begins to build. When important decisions are made consistently, they create a ripple effect that impacts other areas effortlessly. For example, dedicating time to deep learning enhances problem-solving ability, which improves decision-making across multiple challenges. strengthening emotional control, enhances patience, communication, and resilience all at once. Improving organization reduces daily friction and frees mental bandwidth for creativity and planning. One strategic choice can lift the weight of 10 smaller issues. Redirecting focus also enhances freedom. When a person consistently prioritizes meaningful actions, they no longer feel trapped by constant urgency. They organize life around intention rather than chaos. Stress reduces, direction strengthens, confidence grows, not from empty affirmations, but from a track record of actions that create real progress. High-leverage choices build a life that feels grounded, steady, and aligned with purpose. It is important to acknowledge that not every high-impact decision feels exciting. Many are mundane, quiet, and even repetitive. But these actions create the environment where success becomes normal. They build routines that support clarity rather than confusion. They deepen character and sharpen discipline. High-leverage choices are not measured by how impressive they appear, but by the strength they produce over time. To maintain focus, the mind must regularly review its direction. Without reflection, it becomes easy to slip back into familiar patterns. Reflection exposes drift before it becomes dangerous. It reminds the thinker of the larger purpose behind each decision. It strengthens commitment. A strategic life is guided by consistent evaluation, subtle adjustments that keep the path aligned with long-term intention. Redirecting focus also means understanding that some decisions shape identity. When a person chooses actions that align with growth instead of comfort, they begin to see themselves differently. Identity evolves with each meaningful choice. This shift is powerful because behavior naturally follows identity. A person who sees themselves as someone capable of discipline will act with more discipline. A person who sees themselves as someone who makes wise choices will seek wiser paths. High-leverage choices are not just actions. They are statements of who one is becoming. Over time, a life built on high-leverage focus becomes noticeably more stable, more intentional, and more resilient. Challenges no longer derail momentum. Distractions lose their pull. Opportunities become easier to recognize. The thinker becomes more selective, more thoughtful, and more strategic in every arena. Instead of rushing from one urgency to another, they master the ability to choose actions that carry them forward with amplified force. The power of redirecting focus lies in its simplicity. Every day offers a handful of choices that matter far more than the rest. When attention shifts toward those choices, the entire trajectory changes. Progress accelerates, stress lessens, confidence strengthens, the mind becomes sharper, calmer, and more prepared for every challenge that follows. A strategic life is built through deliberate focus, through choosing impact over noise, through committing to the decisions that shape the future rather than those that simply fill the moment. Redirecting focus toward high-leverage choices is the discipline that allows a person to rise above distraction and build a life defined by purpose, strength, and meaningful progress. Number 4. Anticipate obstacles before they appear. Every challenge carries a shadow, and that shadow is the obstacle that waits just beyond the edge of your current understanding. Obstacles are not accidents. They follow patterns, they follow behavior, and they follow the natural resistance that comes with any path of growth. People are often caught off guard, not because those difficulties were unpredictable, but because they never took the time to look ahead and recognize what was quietly forming beneath the surface. Anticipating obstacles before they appear is not pessimism. It is preparation. It is the mindset of someone who understands that progress becomes smoother when the road is studied before the journey begins. Life rewards the individual who can sense friction before it arrives. This skill creates an enormous advantage because it eliminates the shock that derails most people. When a person expects difficulty, the difficulty loses its power. It becomes a step instead of a wall. It becomes part of the process rather than an interruption. Strategic thinkers walk with the awareness that every goal contains hidden barriers, and instead of pretending the path will be smooth, they observe their environment, their habits, their emotional triggers, and the structure of the situation. In doing so, they forecast what might go wrong and prepare responses long before the moment demands them. Most obstacles do not rise suddenly. They grow quietly. Fatigue accumulates. Distractions begin to multiply. Doubt softens commitment. External pressures sneak in. Minor missteps compound. A person who anticipates these early signs recognizes them long before they become threats. They treat small cracks as warnings rather than waiting for them to turn into breaks. This approach saves time, protects energy, and prevents unnecessary frustration. To anticipate obstacles effectively, the mind must become observant. It must pay attention not only to the goal, but also to its surroundings. Every environment contains predictable friction, unexpected demands from others, internal resistance, moments of low motivation, the unpredictability of circumstances, and the emotional cycles that influence behavior. By considering these patterns, a person reduces their vulnerability. They learn to prepare systems that support their progress even when their mindset fluctuates. One of the most reliable ways to anticipate obstacles is to study past experiences. Most people face repeated patterns in life, problems that look different on the surface but share the same underlying structure. By examining the obstacles that have appeared before, the mind begins to recognize the conditions that lead to difficulty. This self-awareness becomes a guiding compass. It prevents old mistakes from returning with new disguises. Anticipation becomes easier because the thinker no longer walks blindly into familiar traps. Another aspect of anticipating obstacles is understanding human nature. People often fail not because the environment is hostile, but because they underestimate their own tendencies. A person may overestimate their discipline, underestimate their distractions, or ignore the emotional fluctuations that shape their decisions. Recognizing these tendencies does not create weakness, it creates strength. When a person acknowledges their limitations, they can build safeguards that reinforce their intentions. This powerful honesty becomes a shield against future setbacks. Strategic preparation also involves imagining the worst-case scenario, not to fear it, but to disarm it. When the mind explores the full spectrum of challenges that could arise, it becomes less intimidated by uncertainty. It develops responses in advance. It sets boundaries, prepares alternatives, strengthens routines, and removes unnecessary variables. This approach gives a sense of calm, because the unknown becomes less threatening when the thinker has already faced it mentally. Anticipating obstacles requires stillness. The mind needs quiet space to see what lies ahead. Constant motion, constant noise, and constant urgency cloud perception. Reflection reveals what rushing conceals. A few moments each day spent reviewing decisions, observing behavior, and evaluating progress creates clarity. This practice exposes the early hints of trouble, allowing the thinker to address them before they expand. Reflection does not slow progress, it protects it. Preparation also involves simplifying the path. The more complicated a plan is, the more likely it is to collapse under pressure. Complexity attracts obstacles, while simplicity reduces them. When a person removes unnecessary steps, minimizes dependencies, and organizes their environment, they eliminate many potential issues before they even appear. A clear path invites fewer surprises. Emotional discipline plays a significant role in anticipating obstacles. Many challenges arise not from the external world, but from internal reaction, impulses, fears, impatience, or frustration. When a person understands their emotional tendencies, they can foresee the situations that trigger them. This foresight allows them to establish strategies in advance, grounding techniques, routines that reduce overwhelm, boundaries that protect mental space, and habits that maintain stability. Emotional preparation prevents sabotage from within. Relationships and social interactions also require anticipation. People can unintentionally create obstacles through unrealistic expectation, misunderstandings, or influence that pulls attention away from priorities. By observing the tendencies of those around them, the strategic thinker understands when to say no, when to distance themselves, and when to set conditions that protect their direction. Anticipating interpersonal obstacles prevents conflict and preserves focus. Momentum depends on readiness. When obstacles appear unexpectedly, they disrupt rhythm and drain energy. But when obstacles are expected, the mind moves around them with minimal friction. The thinker becomes steady, adaptable, and confident. They no longer fear setbacks because setbacks become part of the design. Every difficulty becomes a known factor rather than an unpredictable storm. Anticipation also builds resilience. People who prepare for obstacles do not break when pressure increases. They bend, adjust, and respond with clarity. They are not surprised by difficulty. They are strengthened by it. This calmness distinguishes those who persist from those who collapse. Resilience is not developed in the moment of impact but in the preparation that happens long before the moment arrives. The ability to forecast challenges also improves decision-making. When a person evaluates choices through the lens of possible consequences, they choose paths that reduce unnecessary struggle. They avoid impulsive decisions. They avoid commitments that drain energy. They avoid situations that distract from priorities. This reduces friction long before friction forms. A person who anticipates obstacles gains an extraordinary advantage. They do not waste time recovering from preventable problems. Their energy goes toward progress rather than repair. They move forward while others pause to deal with issues that could have been predicted. This creates a widening gap over time, a gap that becomes noticeable in achievements, stability, and inner strength. The goal is not to eliminate obstacles entirely. Difficulty is part of growth. The goal is to recognize the shape of those difficulties early enough to reduce their impact. When obstacles cannot be avoided, they can still be navigated with skill. When they cannot be solved immediately, they can be approached strategically. When they cannot be removed, they can be endured with discipline. Anticipation creates confidence not born from optimism, but from preparation. It gives the thinker an inner solidity, a sense that no challenge can break them, because they have already seen its outline. They move forward with purpose, aware of what might come, yet unshaken by it. Their path remains strong because it is supported by foresight, rather than hope alone. A strategic life is built by looking ahead, reading the terrain, and preparing the mind to meet difficulty with strength. Anticipating obstacles before they appear is the discipline that transforms chaos into clarity, uncertainty into direction, and challenges into manageable steps toward a stronger, wiser, more resilient version of oneself. Number 5. Strengthen decision-making through pattern recognition. Recognizing patterns is one of the most reliable ways to strengthen your decision-making, because it gives you the ability to understand situations at a deeper level than what's immediately visible. Every challenge, every opportunity, and every interaction carries signals that reveal how things are unfolding, and those signals often repeat themselves in different forms. The more you train your mind to notice these repeating structures, the faster you can evaluate what matters and what doesn't. This isn't about predicting the future with perfect accuracy, but about sharpening your perception so you can guide your choices with more confidence and precision. When you start refining this skill, you begin to navigate situations with a sense of clarity that others mistake for intuition, when in reality it's a practiced awareness built from repeated exposure and deliberate reflection. Pattern recognition becomes powerful when you commit to observing your experiences without rushing past them. Every mistake you've made has a rhythm. Every success you've achieved follows certain steps. Even the decisions that confused you at the time likely fit into a larger cycle you simply didn't recognize yet. To strengthen this awareness, revisit your past decisions and look for common threads. What triggered your choices? What influenced your thinking? What distracted you? What helped you? And what details you initially overlooked. As you uncover these threads, you start forming a mental map that makes future decisions less overwhelming because you've already walked through similar terrains. The mind becomes sharper when it learns to categorize experiences, not as isolated moments, but as interconnected pieces of a larger structure. To truly build pattern recognition, you also need to pay attention to the routines and behaviors of others. People are remarkably consistent, even when they believe they aren't. Their motivations, fears, habits, and reactions follow patterns that can be understood with enough observation. You begin noticing how certain personalities respond to pressure, how groups shift based on influence, how conflicts escalate, and how cooperation forms. This awareness helps you make decisions with more accuracy, because you're not guessing what someone might do next. You're interpreting signals they have already shown. Over time, you learn to adjust your approach, predict outcomes earlier, and position yourself more effectively in every interaction. This doesn't make you manipulative, it makes you perceptive. Strengthening decision-making through pattern recognition also requires paying attention to your emotional patterns. The mind often repeats the same types of reactions to particular triggers, and unless you become aware of those responses, Your decisions will be driven by impulse rather than insight. Notice what frustrates you, what energizes you, what shuts down your thinking, and what brings out your clarity. When you understand your emotional cycles, you gain the ability to separate your immediate feelings from the actual problem you need to solve. Emotional self-awareness makes your decisions more stable because it prevents temporary reactions from becoming permanent choices. Another essential element of pattern recognition is understanding the patterns hidden in information. Data, whether personal or professional, carries signals that show you what's trending upward, what's deteriorating, what requires attention, and what can be dismissed. When you learn to interpret these signals rather than reacting to isolated events, you stop making decisions based on noise and start making decisions based on insight. You begin to recognize when a minor shift is the start of a major change, or when a dramatic moment is actually irrelevant. The more you train yourself to see beyond the surface, the more precise your judgment becomes. To build this skill further, expose yourself to a wider variety of situations. The brain strengthens its ability to detect patterns when it has more examples to compare. Read broadly, observe different industries, talk to people outside your usual environment, study the strategies of individuals who excel at decision-making. Every new perspective expands your library of mental models, giving you more templates to apply when faced with uncertainty. The richness of your experiences determines the sharpness of your perception, and the sharpness of your perception shapes the quality of your decision. Pattern recognition also improves when you commit to slowing down just enough to process what you're seeing. Quick reactions might feel efficient, but insight grows in moments of stillness. Allowing yourself a brief pause before deciding helps you connect the dots between past knowledge and present circumstances. This pause doesn't make you slower, it makes you more deliberate. Over time, that deliberateness becomes second nature, and you start making faster decisions with far greater accuracy, because your mind has learned to filter distractions and identify what truly matters. As you continue refining this skill, you'll notice that many situations you once found complicated become easier to navigate. You'll understand which opportunities are worth pursuing and which are distractions. You'll recognize early warning signs long before they become crises. You'll make choices that seem bold to others but feel natural to you because they align with patterns you've internalized. Your decision-making becomes less about guessing and more about reading the environment with clarity and confidence. Strengthening your ability to see patterns also builds resilience. When challenges arise, you no longer feel overwhelmed because you recognize the structure beneath the chaos. You've seen similar obstacles before, even if not in the same form, and your mind knows how to approach them. This sense of familiarity reduces fear and increases your ability to think calmly under pressure. Challenges stop feeling unpredictable, and unpredictability stops feeling threatening. You step into each situation with a grounded awareness that guides you towards smarter choices. What makes pattern recognition especially transformative is that it improves continuously. Every decision you make adds new information to your mental library. Every experience gives you new insights to apply. Every mistake becomes a reference point rather than a setback. The skill grows automatically as long as you remain attentive to the lessons each moment carries. Over time, you become someone who can analyze situations quickly, adapt to changing circumstances, and choose the best path forward with far greater accuracy than before. In the long run, strengthening decision-making through pattern recognition becomes one of your greatest advantages. It allows you to navigate complexity with ease, adjust your approach with confidence, and understand situations more deeply than those around you. It sharpens your thinking, refines your judgment, and helps you act with purpose, even when uncertainty surrounds you. When your mind learns to read patterns effortlessly, the future becomes less intimidating because you understand the structure behind it. You're no longer reacting to life blindly. You're interpreting the signals that shape your path and using them to make decisions that move you forward with clarity and strength. Number 6. Use scenario mapping for smarter planning. Scenario mapping gives you the ability to prepare for the future with clarity, rather than hope, because it teaches your mind to think in pathways instead of straight lines. Most people walk into situations assuming everything will unfold in a single direction, but life rarely respects such simplicity. Events shift, people change their minds, external factors disrupt momentum, and unexpected opportunities suddenly appear. When you practice scenario mapping, you give yourself the mental space to explore these different directions before they occur, allowing you to respond with confidence when they actually happen. It transforms uncertainty from something threatening into something structured, because you've already examined how different outcomes might look and what actions each one requires. This skill doesn't just reduce fear, it builds strategic calm, the kind of calm that comes from knowing you're prepared for more than one possibility. To use scenario mapping effectively, you begin by identifying the central situation you want to plan for. Instead of demanding a perfect forecast, you explore multiple ways the situation might unfold. You consider the best-case outcome, the worst-case outcome, and the most likely middle ground. But you don't stop there. You push yourself to explore variations within each possibility. The goal isn't to create an overwhelming set of predictions, it's to expand your awareness of what might happen so you aren't blindsided. As you map each branch, your thinking becomes more flexible, and that flexibility strengthens your planning because you're no longer stuck with a single rigid expectation. This approach also forces your mind to examine assumptions you didn't realize you were relying on. Many plans fail not because the idea is flawed, but because the assumption underneath it collapses. Scenario mapping exposes those weak assumptions by showing you what changes if one variable shifts. For example, what happens if support arrives later than expected? What happens if someone doesn't follow through? What happens if resources become limited? What happens if an unexpected opportunity becomes available? Each question leads you into a different direction, and each direction reveals a detail you might have overlooked. By examining these possibilities in advance, you strengthen your plan and refine your judgment. One of the most powerful benefits of scenario mapping is the clarity it brings to decision-making. When you visualize how various situations might unfold, you also identify which actions would be effective across multiple scenarios. These actions become your priority moves because they add value regardless of which outcome emerges. This keeps your planning grounded and prevents you from wasting energy on tasks that only matter in unlikely circumstances. You become more strategic about where you invest your time because you're constantly identifying choices that support the widest range of possible futures. This single shift can save you enormous effort and eliminate unnecessary stress. Using scenario mapping also helps you control emotional reactions. When the mind expects one outcome and receives another, stress rises quickly. But when you've already explored several directions, surprises lose much of their power. You're not scrambling when things shift. Your mind has already rehearsed this version of events. You know what to adjust, what to release, and what to protect. Your emotions stay grounded because you're operating from preparation rather than shock. This emotional stability gives you an advantage in chaotic environments because you're able to think clearly while others panic or shut down. Calm decision-making becomes your default, rather than a rare moment of clarity. Another advantage of scenario mapping is that it highlights hidden opportunities. While exploring different branches, you might discover beneficial paths that weren't visible when you were focused on a single outcome. You might realize there's a shortcut you hadn't considered, a collaboration that becomes viable under certain conditions, or a strategy that only works if a specific external factor aligns. These insights rarely appear when you limit yourself to only one plan. Scenario mapping reveals the nuances that exist between possibilities, and within those nuances lie chances to advance more effectively than you originally imagined. This method also strengthens your ability to handle setbacks. When something doesn't go as expected, people often feel frustrated or defeated because they didn't think about the possibility beforehand. But when you've mapped several scenarios, setbacks simply become shifts into a different branch, one you're already prepared for. Instead of viewing it as failure, you view it as a transition. That mindset helps you recover faster and maintain a sense of direction, even when circumstances take a sudden turn. You stop treating obstacles as dead ends and start treating them as rerouting points, which dramatically increases your resilience. To deepen the effects of scenario mapping, reflect on the scenarios you create and observe what they reveal about your thinking. Notice whether your predictions lean too heavily toward optimism or caution. Notice whether you tend to overlook certain types of variables, such as timing, human behavior, or resource limitations. As you become more aware of these biases, You adjust your mapping process and make it more balanced. Over time, your ability to forecast improves, not because you're trying to guess the future precisely, but because you're learning to consider it from multiple angles. This balanced perspective makes you more strategic and less reactive. Scenario mapping becomes even more powerful when you combine it with action triggers, pre-decided steps you will take if a specific condition occurs. For example, if a situation moves toward the positive scenario, you know exactly what move to make to accelerate it. If it shifts toward the more challenging scenario, you've already identified how to protect your momentum. These triggers eliminate hesitation because the decision has already been made ahead of time. You're not overwhelmed by choices in the moment. You're simply following a plan that was crafted with clarity. This increases your speed and precision, especially under pressure. As you continue practicing this method, your ability to forecast outcomes becomes sharper, not because you're magically predicting the future, but because you're training your mind to process information with greater depth. You start noticing small indicators that point toward one scenario or another. You detect changes earlier, respond faster, and make adjustments before situations escalate. What once felt complicated becomes manageable because you're no longer relying on hope. You're navigating with a structured mental model that adapts as events unfold. In the long run, scenario mapping turns uncertainty into an advantage. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by unpredictable situations, you approach them with curiosity and strategic awareness. You become someone who plans deeply, thinks clearly, and adapts intelligently. Every possibility becomes something you can work with, rather than something you fear. This mindset empowers you to pursue larger goals, face complicated challenges with confidence, and maintain control even when the environment around you shifts. You're no longer waiting for the future to decide your direction. You're shaping your path by preparing for every version of what might come. Number 7. Adapt strategies quickly under shifting pressure. Pressure exposes the true strength of your thinking. When circumstances tighten, when time shrinks, and when unexpected shifts disrupt the path you thought was secure, your ability to adjust becomes the difference between progress and paralysis. Many people crumble under shifting pressure not because they lack intelligence, but because they cling to plans that no longer fit the moment. Adaptation is not a sign of weakness. It is evidence of strategic maturity. It proves that you understand the world moves, environments change, and success belongs to the person who is willing to evolve faster than the situation unfolding around them. Strategic flexibility becomes your anchor, not because it holds you in place, but because it keeps your mind steady as everything else moves. Adapting quickly is a discipline that begins with awareness. You cannot adjust to something you refuse to acknowledge. When pressure rises, you must observe the situation without exaggeration and without denial. This calm assessment prevents impulsive reactions and opens the door for more deliberate decisions. You take note of what has shifted, what remains stable, and what requires immediate attention. This form of observation is not emotional. It's grounded and steady. The better you become at reading the environment without distortion, the faster you can design a response that aligns with reality rather than fear or assumptions. This clarity sharpens your reaction time and prevents mistakes born from panic. Once awareness is established, adaptation moves into the realm of choice. You decide whether the current strategy still serves the goal or whether it must be adjusted. Many people struggle in this moment because they mistake consistency for stubbornness. Consistency is maintaining commitment to the goal. Stubbornness is refusing to change methods even when those methods no longer work. A strategic mind understands the difference. The goal remains fixed, but the route can shift. You don't abandon your direction. You adjust your approach. This mindset gives you the freedom to pivot without losing confidence, and it allows you to stay agile without sacrificing long-term purpose. Adaptation also requires humility. Pressure often reveals that your original assumptions were incomplete, that certain preparations were insufficient, or that unexpected variables were stronger than expected. Instead of resisting this realization, you embrace it as information. Humility turns pressure into feedback. It shows you where your thinking can improve, where your preparation can deepen, and where your responses can gain more precision. This perspective removes the emotional weight that often accompanies shifting situations, making it easier to think clearly. You stop taking setbacks personally and start treating them as signals that your strategy needs refinement. One of the most practical tools for adapting quickly is the ability to shorten your decision-making cycles. Long cycles trap you in hesitation, allowing pressure to grow until it feels overwhelming. Quick cycles, however, give you momentum. You gather only the essential information, make a focused decision, act with commitment, and evaluate the result. This continuous loop creates progress even when the environment is unstable. You're not waiting for perfect clarity. You're moving with the clearest insight available in the moment. This rhythm keeps you from getting stuck and allows you to stay ahead of shifting conditions. Over time, these rapid adjustments build a strong sense of control, even when facing uncertain or turbulent situations. To adapt effectively, you also need to cultivate emotional steadiness. Pressure has a way of amplifying internal noise, making problems appear larger and solutions seem farther away. When emotions rise unchecked, they distort judgment. A calm mind, however, maintains perspective. You regulate your internal reactions not by suppressing them, but by grounding them. You breathe, anchor your attention, and remind yourself that clarity emerges from stillness. This inner stability sharpens your ability to evaluate the situation accurately, which directly strengthens your capacity to adjust intelligently. Emotional steadiness is not about removing feeling. It's about ensuring your decisions are not ruled by reaction. Adaptation becomes easier when you recognize that every situation contains a range of possible moves. Pressure often tricks the mind into believing there are only two choices: push harder on the current plan, or give up entirely. But strategic thinking reveals alternatives. You can change the order of steps, shift priorities, adjust timing, reassign resources, or experiment with a lightweight version of the original idea. By thinking in terms of options rather than ultimatums, you open space for creative solutions. This sense of possibility transforms the way you respond to challenges, because you no longer feel trapped. You see pathways instead of walls, and that vision makes adaptation far more natural. Another crucial element in adapting under pressure is the ability to release what no longer serves the current moment. A strategy that once worked well can turn into a burden if the environment shifts. Attachment to past success can blind you to present needs. Strategic adaptation requires the discipline to let go of what has become inefficient. You don't discard it out of frustration. You release it because holding onto it weakens your effectiveness. This form of letting go is intentional and thoughtful. It makes room for new approaches that match the demands of the moment. Over time, this ability to release outdated methods becomes a defining feature of your growth. Adaptation is also strengthened by your willingness to test ideas rather than wait for a perfect solution. Under pressure, speed matters, but so does learning. Small experiments allow you to move forward while gathering information. You test a step, observe the result, refine your approach, and expand what works. This process reduces risk while increasing momentum. Each small test builds confidence, because you're no longer gambling on a single grand plan. You're iterating your way through uncertainty. These micro-adjustments accumulate into significant progress and give you a strategic edge over those who remain stuck waiting for ideal conditions. To adapt quickly, you must also adjust your expectations. Pressure often emerges when reality moves differently than assumed. Instead of resisting the shift, you accept it and move with it. This acceptance does not mean passivity. It means acknowledging what is happening so you can respond effectively. Your expectations become flexible, not rigid. You allow the situation to evolve and adapt your moves accordingly. This mindset keeps you aligned with the rhythm of the moment rather than fighting against it. Expectations become guides rather than chains, and this freedom sharpens your awareness and strengthens your decisions. Adaptation is not just about surviving pressure. It's about using pressure to sharpen your thinking. When the environment shifts, it forces you to examine your priorities. You discover which parts of your strategy truly matter and which can be adjusted without harm. Pressure simplifies the unnecessary and amplifies the essential. This clarity helps you move with purpose rather than distraction. By embracing the lessons pressure introduces, you transform chaotic conditions into moments of growth. You begin to see that discomfort often points toward opportunities for refinement. The more you practice adapting your strategies, the more natural it becomes. Flexibility evolves into confidence because your mind learns that change does not threaten your ability to succeed. It simply invites you to adjust your angle. You realize that the person who can adapt quickly maintains an advantage in every environment. Markets shift, people change, plans evolve, and conditions fluctuate. But your ability to pivot without losing direction keeps you steady. You become someone who responds intelligently rather than emotionally. You move with intention rather than resistance. You adjust with purpose rather than fear. Ultimately, adapting under pressure becomes a core part of your identity. You no longer see challenges as something to avoid. You see them as opportunities to reveal your capability. Each shift becomes a test of your clarity, your discipline, and your commitment to stay aligned with your goal, even when the path changes. You understand that the world will never stop moving, but neither will you. You adjust, refine, and elevate your strategy as many times as needed. This ability ensures that no matter what changes around you, your progress continues forward, steady, adaptable, and resilient. Number 8. Leverage resources with strategic precision. Resources are often misunderstood. Many people assume resources only mean money, tools, or connections. But resources extend far beyond what can be held in your hand or stored in a bank. Your time, energy, attention, knowledge, relationships, habits, environment, and even your emotional state are all resources that influence your ability to grow and succeed. When you start treating every asset you possess, tangible or intangible, as a resource that must be used deliberately, you begin to operate with a level of strategic precision that separates thoughtful action from random effort. Success rarely depends on how many resources you have. It depends on how intelligently you use what you already possess. Strategic precision begins with recognizing what you have instead of focusing on what you lack. Many people remain stuck because they believe they need more before moving forward. More money, more support, more time, more perfect conditions. That mindset creates hesitation. The person who leverages resources effectively starts by examining their current situation and identifying strengths that can be used immediately. This approach builds momentum. Instead of feeling limited, you feel empowered because you see possibilities in places you previously ignored. By acknowledging the value of what's already available, you shift from a mindset of deficiency to one of capability. To use resources with precision, you must understand their true purpose. Resources are not meant to make life easier. They are meant to make progress more efficient. A resource that is scattered, wasted, or misdirected can become a burden rather than a tool. But a resource that is applied with intention amplifies your efforts and strengthens your direction. Precision comes from asking two essential questions: what matters most right now, and how can this resource serve that priority? When you pair resources with priorities, you eliminate waste and strengthen impact. Every action becomes more aligned, and every asset becomes more valuable. Time is one of the most powerful resources, yet it is often misused because it feels constant, even though it is limited. When you treat time as something you shape, rather than something that shapes you, you begin directing it with more control. Precision with time means identifying the activities that yield the highest return. It means cutting out distractions, reducing unnecessary commitments, and strengthening the discipline to focus on what truly moves your life forward. When you direct time deliberately, you reclaim authority over your direction and free yourself from the chaos of a scattered schedule. Energy functions differently from time because it fluctuates. Some tasks require deep focus, others require creativity, and others simply require consistency. Precision with energy means aligning tasks with your natural rhythms rather than fighting them. It means recognizing when your mind is sharpest and placing important work in those windows. It means noticing when fatigue tries to weaken your performance and adjusting the workload rather than forcing it. This awareness helps you execute with greater quality because you're not pushing against your own limitations, you're working with your strengths. Strategic individuals understand that energy, when used wisely, multiplies productivity far more than raw effort. Attention is another resource that determines the quality of your actions. Whatever you pay attention to grows in influence. When your attention is scattered, your progress weakens. When your attention is focused, your results strengthen. Strategic precision means filtering out noise, so your mind can remain centered. It means being selective about what earns your focus and intentional about the thoughts you entertain. Guarding attention is essential because a distracted mind cannot produce meaningful outcomes. Precision is not about doing more, it's about giving your mind fewer, more important targets, so it can apply its full force without fragmentation. Knowledge becomes a powerful resource when applied rather than stored. Many people collect information but fail to convert it into action. Precision with knowledge means learning specifically for your goals, applying insights immediately, and refining what you know through experience. Knowledge grows stronger when used. It sharpens judgment, clarifies decisions, and shortens the time it takes to solve problems. When you approach learning with purpose, every new skill strengthens your strategic advantage. You stop consuming information mindlessly and begin building a practical mental toolkit that supports your ambition. Relationships are also significant resources, not in a transactional sense, but in the sense that people bring perspective, support, expertise, and connection. Strategic precision with relationships means surrounding yourself with those who elevate your thinking, rather than drain your focus. It means learning from those who have walked the path you're aiming for, and offering value to those who can grow alongside you. When relationships are built on mutual growth and respect, they become sources of strength. They expose you to knowledge you might not discover alone and give you anchors during challenging moments. Precision in relationships is about choosing quality over quantity, depth over surface-level exchange. Environment influences your performance more than you often realize. The spaces you work in, the atmosphere you create, and the energy around you all contribute to how effectively you use your resources. A supportive environment reduces resistance and increases momentum. When you remove clutter, eliminate distractions, and create spaces that encourage clarity, you free up mental bandwidth. Strategic precision means intentionally designing your environment to support your growth, rather than letting it become an obstacle. A well-structured environment doesn't require more effort. It reduces the amount of effort needed to stay consistent. Strategic precision also applies to financial resources. Money, when used without intention, disappears quickly, but when guided by purpose, it strengthens your stability and opens opportunities. Precision with finances means understanding the difference between spending and investing. It means allocating money toward tools, education, and systems that enhance your capability, rather than indulging in impulses that weaken your momentum. Financial discipline strengthens every other resource because it reduces stress, increases options, and accelerates growth. You learn to use money to support your future rather than letting it slip away through momentary desires. Your habits represent another form of resource, one that determines the direction of your days. A powerful habit multiplies your efforts, while a weak habit drains them. When you choose habits intentionally, you create a foundation that supports long-term progress. Precision with habits means selecting routines that align with your purpose and eliminating those that work against it. It means designing small daily actions that accumulate into meaningful results. Habits may seem simple, but their influence is profound because they operate quietly, shaping your life without demanding constant awareness. To leverage resources with precision, you must avoid spreading yourself thin. More effort does not equal more progress. Strategic individuals concentrate their resources on fewer, more impactful targets. They understand that depth produces transformation while breadth produces exhaustion. Precision requires you to choose carefully, commit fully, and execute consistently. When your resources are aligned, your actions become sharper, and your progress accelerates because you're no longer leaking energy into unimportant directions. Ultimately, leveraging resources with strategic precision is about discipline, awareness, and intentionality. It is about recognizing that every resource you possess, whether internal or external, can either strengthen your growth or weaken it, depending on how you use it. When you apply each resource deliberately, time, energy, attention, knowledge, relationships, environment, finances, and habits, you create a system that works in your favor. You stop reacting to your circumstances and begin shaping them. Every decision becomes clearer, every action becomes more purposeful, and every step brings you closer to the person you aim to become. Precision transforms your resources into instruments of progression. It gives you the power to do more with less, to multiply your influence, and to maintain steady movement even when conditions shift. When you commit to using what you have with intention, you unlock strength that was already within your reach. You gain the confidence to move forward knowing you are not lacking. You are fully capable, fully equipped, and fully prepared to advance with purpose. Number 9. Evaluate outcomes to sharpen future tactics. Every meaningful strategy strengthens itself the moment you pause long enough to study the results it produces. That pause is where sharp thinkers separate themselves from reactive ones. When you choose to look closely at what actually happened, not what you hoped would happen, you gain access to insights that refine your next move with far greater accuracy. Evaluating outcomes isn't about judgment, guilt, or blame. It's about extracting the hidden intelligence inside every action. The more willing you are to examine the truth of your choices, the faster your strategic instincts evolve, because every outcome becomes data, and every piece of data becomes direction. Most people repeat the same patterns because they never analyze the consequences of their previous decisions. They rush forward, assume improvement will happen automatically, or cling to an assumption that effort equals progress. But strategic thinkers measure progress based on evidence, not emotion. They treat every result as a report from reality, a message that reveals what to strengthen, what to discard, and what to rethink entirely. This approach frees you from the loop of guessing and hoping. Instead, you begin operating from clarity, accuracy, and deliberate reasoning. You move with intention because you understand the terrain before you take the next step. Evaluating outcomes begins with a calm willingness to review your process without distortion. That means stepping back from ego, expectations, and the desire to defend your choices. It means studying what unfolded with the same neutrality a scientist uses when examining test results. You look at the actions you took, the conditions you were under, the resources you had, and the behaviors of the people involved. This reveals what actually influenced the situation rather than what you assumed influenced it. Patterns appear, blind spots surface, nuances emerge that were invisible in the moment. This shift from reactive interpretation to objective assessment is the foundation of better long-term decision-making. Once the initial review is complete, the next step is tracing the chain of cause and effect. Every outcome has multiple contributing factors, and identifying them gives you the ability to re-engineer future behavior. Instead of labeling something a success or failure, break it down into components. What worked specifically? What lagged behind? What variables were overlooked? What constraints could have been adjusted? This structured dissection helps you understand not only what happened but why it happened. And once you understand the why, your ability to craft stronger tactics rises exponentially. Strong evaluators also distinguish between controllable factors and uncontrollable ones. Strategic thinking thrives on this clarity. When you recognize which aspects were within your influence, you gain direction for improvement. When you recognize which aspects were outside your control, you avoid wasting energy on them in the future. You stop personalizing outcomes that were shaped by external forces and start optimizing the pieces that truly belong to you. This reinforces resilience because you learn to focus on your sphere of influence instead of drowning in frustration or misplaced responsibility. Another essential piece of evaluating outcomes is reviewing your assumptions. Every strategy is built on expectations, predictions, or beliefs about how something will unfold. When an outcome doesn't match your assumption, it reveals a gap in your thinking. That gap becomes one of the most valuable insights you can gain. Strategic thinkers actively hunt for flawed assumptions because correcting them strengthens every future move. They ask themselves whether they underestimated difficulty, overestimated timing, misread motivation, ignored risk, or misinterpreted signals. This assumption audit prevents stagnation and accelerates mental refinement. A powerful method for deeper evaluation is comparing intended objectives with actual results. This contrast highlights drift, small deviations that accumulated as you took action. It shows where attention faded, where execution slipped, or where conditions changed faster than expected. Studying this gap helps you tighten discipline, strengthen follow-through, and refine your planning structure. It trains your mind to spot where alignment was lost, so you can maintain better focus next time. Over time, you become someone who consistently closes the gap between intention and execution. As you continue evaluating outcomes, you begin noticing recurring patterns in your behavior. These patterns reveal your natural tendencies, strengths, blind spots, and defaults under pressure. Maybe you notice a habit of rushing at the end of a task. Maybe you find that you misjudge timelines. Maybe you're overly optimistic in your planning or overly cautious in your decision-making. These tendencies shape results whether you acknowledge them or not. Once you identify them, you gain the power to correct them. This level of self-awareness strengthens your strategic precision and makes every decision more calculated. You also learn to evaluate outcomes from multiple perspectives. Instead of viewing the situation only through your own lens, you study how others experienced it. You consider how different stakeholders interpreted your actions and how their responses influenced the outcome. This panoramic evaluation broadens your strategic thinking because it exposes variables you could never see from a single viewpoint. It also enhances emotional intelligence and improves your ability to anticipate reactions, obstacles, and alliances in future scenarios. The wider your perspective, the sharper your tactics. As this evaluative process becomes habitual, you train your mind to adjust faster. You no longer wait weeks or months to review results. You start noticing signals in real time. This lets you redirect effort, modify strategy, or correct course before small issues become major setbacks. You build a continuous feedback loop between action and analysis. That loop becomes the engine of foresight, accuracy, and adaptability. It turns you into someone who refines strategy mid-motion rather than after everything is over. This is the level where skilled thinkers gain an undeniable advantage. But the real power of evaluating outcomes lies in its cumulative effect. Each review strengthens your reasoning, sharpens your instincts, and broadens your mental library of scenarios. Over time, you no longer rely on guesswork because you've studied patterns across dozens of similar experiences. You begin predicting consequences with remarkable accuracy because your mind recognizes subtle cues that most people miss. Every outcome, good or bad, becomes a lesson that compounds into stronger judgment. This is how strategic intelligence is built, not through theories but through precise reflection on lived experiences. Ultimately, evaluating outcomes teaches you to navigate uncertainty with confidence. It shows you that no result is final, no mistake is fatal, and no success is complete. Every outcome is simply information waiting to be converted into insight. The more consistently you examine these results, the more reliable your strategy becomes. You stop reacting blindly and start moving deliberately. You become someone who understands the terrain, anticipates obstacles, and chooses actions that produce the greatest long-term advantage. And with each cycle of action, reflection, and adjustment, your ability to outthink challenges grows stronger, more refined, and more resilient. Number 10. Develop mental frameworks for consistent advantage. A powerful strategist isn't defined by lucky moments or rare flashes of insight, but by the mental structures they build to guide their thinking every single day. These internal frameworks allow you to navigate uncertainty, solve problems faster, and respond to challenges with a level of clarity that feels almost effortless. Instead of relying on guesswork or emotional impulses, you rely on tested mental patterns that sharpen your judgment and help you interpret situations with precision. Over time, these frameworks become the engine behind consistent advantage, enabling you to stay grounded while others react unpredictably to pressure, change, or unexpected setbacks. Developing mental frameworks begins with the decision to organize your thinking rather than letting it wander without direction. Most people treat thoughts like passing weather. They drift, shift, and disappear without any structure. But a strategist examines how their mind processes information and builds systems that help them filter what matters, disregard noise, and map the terrain of any situation. This structured approach doesn't limit creativity. It amplifies it by giving the mind a stable foundation from which to operate. The more organized your thinking becomes, the more effortless your decisions feel because you're no longer scrambling for clarity in the moment. One of the first components of building strong mental frameworks is identifying the core principles that dictate your reasoning. These principles function like a compass that remains steady, regardless of the environment. They define how you interpret challenges, assess risks, choose priorities, and allocate attention. When these principles are clear, your decisions become consistent. You stop chasing every distraction or reacting to temporary emotion. You begin evaluating situations through stable criteria, which strengthens your ability to stay focused even when everything around you feels chaotic. This consistency becomes a competitive advantage because reliability is rare, especially under pressure. Another crucial aspect is creating mental filters that help you separate essential information from irrelevant noise. The modern world overwhelms you with endless data, opinions, warnings, and possibilities. Without effective filters, your mind becomes cluttered and reactive. But when you develop a framework that categorizes information by relevance, urgency, value, or long-term impact, you gain the ability to think with clarity even in high-pressure environments. Instead of drowning in complexity, you identify patterns quickly, catch signals early, and maintain awareness without getting distracted. These filters strengthen your decision-making because they ensure that only meaningful inputs shape your actions. Mental frameworks also depend on building reliable models for predicting behavior, consequences, and implications. Skilled thinkers recognize that most situations follow recognizable patterns. Human behavior repeats. Market cycles recur. Social dynamics evolve through familiar stages. When you create internal models based on these patterns, you develop foresight. You're not guessing what might happen. You're evaluating possibilities through a structure informed by experience, observation, and strategic logic. These predictive models don't guarantee accuracy, but they dramatically increase your ability to anticipate obstacles and opportunities before they appear. This anticipation is one of the strongest forms of advantage you can possess. Another powerful framework involves breaking down complex situations into smaller components. Many people become overwhelmed not because a problem is impossible, but because they attempt to solve everything at once. A strategist dissects the problem, identifies the critical pieces, and addresses them step by step. This decomposition reduces emotional overwhelm and sharpens problem-solving accuracy. It allows you to detect weak points, highlight strengths, and understand the mechanics of a situation, rather than responding to surface-level impressions. Over time, this habit strengthens your analytical sharpness and builds confidence in your ability to handle large challenges. Mental frameworks also require understanding the difference between strategy and tactics. Strategy determines direction, tactics determine execution. When you train your mind to distinguish these two layers, you avoid confusing movement with progress. You begin structuring your thinking so that every tactic supports a larger strategic aim. This alignment prevents wasted effort and helps you maintain momentum. It also ensures that your choices contribute to meaningful progress rather than temporary activity. Many people fail not because they lack effort, but because they lack structure. Your frameworks prevent that by keeping every action tied to a purposeful trajectory. Another element of strong mental frameworks is the ability to question assumptions. This habit protects you from operating on outdated beliefs, inaccurate predictions, or emotional biases. By routinely examining what you're assuming, you prevent blind spots from directing your choices. You build a mind that stays flexible, updated, and self-correcting. Questioning assumptions doesn't make you indecisive, it makes you precise. It refines your understanding and ensures that your decisions stem from clarity rather than momentum or wishful thinking. This adaptability becomes a major advantage in environments where circumstances shift quickly. Mental frameworks also thrive on defined feedback loops. Instead of acting and hoping for the best, you create systems that measure progress, reveal inefficiencies, and highlight improvements. Every action becomes part of a cycle: plan, execute, evaluate, refine. This cycle strengthens your reasoning because it forces you to assess results and adjust strategy based on evidence rather than emotion. It ensures that your thinking evolves with experience rather than remaining static. Over time, these feedback loops increase your resilience because you learn to adapt without losing direction. You start expecting refinement rather than perfection, which helps you stay effective even when outcomes are unpredictable. Another key component is building mental simulations. This involves mentally rehearsing scenarios before making decisions, so you can visualize consequences, anticipate reactions, and strengthen your readiness. These simulations act like strategic rehearsals, equipping you with responses before challenges fully materialize. This method sharpens intuition without relying on impulse. It strengthens your sense of timing, improves your ability to navigate uncertainty, and prepares you for multiple pathways instead of depending on a single plan. When you repeatedly simulate scenarios, your mind becomes more agile, and your confidence becomes grounded rather than fragile. Mental frameworks gain even more strength when you establish standards for evaluating choices. Instead of making decisions based on mood or convenience, you develop criteria that align with your long-term objectives. These standards define what is acceptable, what is necessary, and what is non-negotiable. They prevent you from drifting off course or settling for shortcuts that create long-term problems. When you use clear standards, your choices become sharper, your boundaries stronger, and your strategy more resilient. Others may waver under pressure, but you maintain direction because your framework guides you even when emotions fluctuate. Finally, mental frameworks require constant refinement. They grow stronger through experience, reflection, exposure to new perspectives, and the willingness to adjust them as circumstances evolve. The goal is not rigidity but reliability. You build structures flexible enough to adapt yet stable enough to guide you through uncertainty. This dynamic balance is what creates consistent advantage. While others scramble to react to changing conditions, you move with confidence because your mental systems support clarity, accuracy, and foresight. Every challenge becomes easier to navigate because your thinking is organized, disciplined, and deliberately engineered for advantage.